Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Sports. And in a very significant announcement, World Rugby have officially confirmed that the lower tackle height trial will officially be extended to the Under 20 Championship in 2026, after it has been successfully rolled out as a trial across community rugby all over the world, where all the different nations basically sort of started opting into the lower tackle height as a bunch of different law trials. And South Africa has been part of that as well. And this basically, I think, marks the first step towards us potentially coming into rugby at the highest level, whereby, let's say, in the next 4 to 5 years, it will be illegal to tackle any player above the sternum. That is what the sort of trial is. This basically means that right now we've got the tackle height up to basically here, below the neck region. So if you hit a shoulder, for example, that's fine. Now they're going to be lowering that from there down to about there. And you make sure you have to basically hit sort of everything below the sternum, which becomes quite a significant change with regards to, you think about your big tackles that are often being sort of hit here in the chest. Now we're going to see tackles having to go below here, which means you're tackling kind of there. And this has a lot of very, very significant knock-on effects. Now, obviously, the positive ones and the reason they're doing it is safety. And that's what they're trying to sort of prevent, head contact, concussions, and make the game safer. One of the sort of big changes of this is that you kind of potentially moving away from tackles where the ball is basically sort of ball and or tackle, where you think you're being hit over here and you've got the ball over there, you can't get the ball away. Players that get sort of tackled around the waist and that kind of thing, your hands are often free to make the offload, which means this is a very significant change. It's not just a case of, we're going to see sort of lower tackles and, therefore, hopefully we're going to see it safer. It's actually fundamentally changed the way we play the game. And we're going to get to the press release and talk a little bit about it in just a second. But I want to know what you think initially. What is your thoughts on the tackle height? And this is basically what's happened. So legal tackle height is set at the sternum in line with community trials. The community tackle trials have shown positive results, behavior change, and a positive game experience. Now the game experience, they are then talking about the offloading, for example, and it being a bit more open, a bit easier to sort of get that offload away. That is the whole sort of change there. And they said associated law change for ball carriers to also be trialed to protect the unique characteristics of the sport. So there are going to be exceptions to this as well. And they're basically going to be, so the next steps we consider the conclusion of the tournament. So with regards to that, in terms of why were they doing it, over here, it says, following the findings from the community game of up to a 10% reduction in the number of upright tackles, the World Rugby Executive Board took the decision to recommend to Council that those opt-in trials become full law community level from July 2026. World Rugby can now also announce that it has been approved a request from unions to expand the trial into closed trial at the elite rugby level. So, for example, in a South African perspective, we can now roll this out at a Currie Cup level, potentially, at a Varsity Cup level and the likes of that. And down the line, this will now be considered for your URCs, top 14s, EPCRs, and the likes of that. Now, in terms of that is the first trial, so your tackle below the sternum. Other trials that are going to be added to the championship in Georgia in 2026 is allowing for pick-and-go actions near the rucks and for players in the active scoring where the sternum becomes much harder to tackle. So there, for example, we're still going to be able to, when somebody picks and goes like this, you're still going to be able to make the contact on their shoulder and the likes of that, be able to get your shoulder nice and low. Because obviously, if it's a pick and go, and if you're going to dive for the ball, you can't suddenly start worrying about where the guy's waist is. So there are obviously going to be, situations where you don't have to tackle below the sternum necessarily. Obviously, this is not going to be in the middle of the field when the fly half gets it. You can't come running in and smack him over here, which I think is probably one of the big issues is, a lot of upright tackles and shoulders going slightly above, making head contact, and that's kind of where the safety aspect comes in. What I think is a very good law is sanctioning ball carriers who lead dangerously with their head into contact, and I think this is a very good idea. We've got players who basically almost sort of dive bomb and sort of throw themselves forward, head first basically into contact, same as sort of jumping into contact. And what we've seen before is trials where you cannot go into contact with your head below your hips. And it took a while, and this was in 2011, it took a while to sort of adjust. But again, I think this is a good law change, because I do think that we are very much penalizing and really punishing the tackler all the time for head contact. But at the same time, the player being tackled, the ball carrier, is often going sort of head first and almost sort of diving into it. And it becomes, well, how do you stop them? How do you not have head contact? How do you avoid it? And now they're basically saying, so they obviously need to expand exactly what classifies as going into contact with your head, lead dangerously into the head. But you can no longer just sort of basically throw your head forward, right, and kind of use it as a preventative measure of trying to gain advantage. And as soon as the tackler makes contact with the head, then all of a sudden they're getting sent off. So I think that's a nice addition. I'm interested to sort of see what will classify as a as dangerous, inverted commas, and a dangerous act, because that'll obviously be the big sort of game changer with regards to if this is going to be a good one or not. And then the final one is permitting double tackles, provided the first tackler makes contact below the sternum. Now, that's a bit ambiguous, to be honest. And I want to sort of see, I mean, does that mean, for example, if someone makes a hit over here, somebody can then kind of hit them in and around the shoulder area? Is it a case of, as long as somebody hits over here, they can kind of hit everywhere? That's a bit sort of ambiguous. And obviously we have to wait exactly what the final law will say. But it's an interesting sort of concept. So they're not removing the double tackle, which I think is very important. You talk about, dominant tackles and the likes of that. They're not removing that. Interesting for me is over here is the fact over here, it says limited trials of low tackle height are the latest and ongoing long line of measures in elite rugby focused on player welfare. World Rugby has introduced a long line of measures using laws such as head contact process and sanctions, etc., etc. And that's all sort of gone into this. And they said the law trial has been recommended following broad consultation with the whole game, including specialist working groups with representatives from International Rugby Players Association, International Rugby Match Officials, Six Nations, U20 Rugby Championship, Major League Rugby, League, National Rugby, so France Rugby, Rugby Football Union, so RFU, England, South Africa Rugby Union, so we've been part of that, SANZAR, as well as a couple of other different ones over there. Over there, you can see the France Rugby, as I mentioned, the French one. So it's going to be an interesting trial. So we have been part of this. Now, interestingly enough, this almost actually plays to a certain degree into the Springboks' hands, because the Springboks statistically, by the way, fun fact, the Springboks statistically tackle lower than any other tier 1 nation. So if you look at the percentage of tackles that happen below waist tackles, below chest, waist high tackles, we actually rank higher than any other tier 1 nation. And I think tier 2 nation, but obviously I don't think they have the stats as accurately. So this is an interesting situation where obviously South Africa, having been part of these trials, have kind of almost seen this coming, and they've been very cognizant of trying to change the way they tackle. If you watch the way they train, they very much do train about how to get low, adjust, make sure you're making that tackle as low as possible. So in many ways, if this goes through, South Africa are ahead of the curve, as per usual. As always, Rassie Erasmus is ahead of the curve. So it's funny because a lot of South African fans will talk about this, the game's gone soft and this is going to ruin everything. It's actually potentially going to play into our hands because we have been preparing for this for a while now. And we're getting this more right than a lot of other nations. So it's an interesting scenario. And I don't think we'll see this obviously for the next World Cup in 2027, but I think this is a very big reality that come 2031 in the United States, we will potentially see this law being implemented. What do you think of the law? Is it a good idea? Bad idea? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Smash the like icon in the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.